1, action! We're live.
We are live.
Yeah, and it's the Professor P and Mr. Dallas Brown show.
Yeah, I'm back.
We're back
for a, I don't know how long a period of time.
well, at least 2 hours today, right?
Sure, we'll give it 2 hours today.
Yeah. All right. So Twisted Mopar Garage says stand by for action. Do you remember where that came from?
Muppet Show.
Yes, it was the Muppet Show. That's right. Absolutely. John Wilburn was second. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was third. Look at you, man.
Hey,
getting in there.
That was me.
Yeah, right. Dean, we got the Cove, One-Eyed Cat. Patrick, we got One-Eyed, Patrick, Bill, First Responder, and Patrick. And John was in here too. Yeah, he was number 2. So yeah, we're kind of caught up, man. I took me almost a week and a half to get the Power Glide put into the Dart. Yeah, I ran into a little bit of issues here and there and realized that it's just easier to buy a stock bracket and modify it than to make one from scratch. So.
Oh, yeah. I hate making stuff. I do make stuff because of an unlikely Buick community. There is no parts generally. Unless you have a 1970 to 72 Skylark or 68 to 72 Skylark, you're pretty golden. But if you have something outside of that realm, it's all handmade.
Yeah,
it's the only way to do it.
And being a 66 Dart, there's really nothing. I've been making custom parts for that thing ever since I've started. Motor mounts and everything. So, and I was going to take the factory, the transmission cross member that I had modified to fit the 904 when I set the engine back. I was like, I'm going to cut this one up. And I was like, you know what? No, I'm going to leave this one alone because there's so much fab work in that one already. That if I ever decide to go 904 back, like when the kids want to start racing, I'll have them race that car. I'll just put a Magnum 360 in it with one of my 450 horsepower recipes in it and let them have at it,
Yeah.
It'll be a good little car, something that weighs 3,000 pounds, 450. It'll run in the, low 7s, high 6s. It should be fun. Should be fun there, so. Yeah, are you going to have anything coming up?
You mean Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood?
Yeah.
I was actually just thinking about that while you were chattering away there. How I haven't done anything in a week. I just did something last week. I put a new video up. A lot of everybody in here has already seen it and thanks for putting this up. I'm glad you're back. I'm glad to see that you're doing okay. My count this far is I'm down 44 pounds. I'm down to 178 pounds. My life is in utter chaos, but it seems like every day is getting a little bit better.
That's good.
Let's see, coming up, I do have the 63 Special still in the garage, just doing nothing. I also have my T-Bird in the garage now. Moved it from the house garage. I got everything unpacked off of it, tires aired up, the whole 9 yards, and put it in the garage. I got to get it back together and running correctly. And I'm kind of debating on whether or not to put it on the chopping block or just get it running and driving and take it to the No Name Nationals and let her eat a few times, before I send it on her way. And I'm going to take the limiters off the front end too, the straps, so it does those crazy wheelies again. I think people like that. So
yeah, I've actually got I got a care package for you coming. Fuel injection for your Suburban.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
You pulled it off the Dart, huh?
It's all off the Dart. I got that VRS on there, and that thing runs awesome on there. I did have. You know what? I'll do a spoiler alert. Last week, I did have a breakdown. My very first time that car's ever left me on the side of the road, and it had nothing to do with the carburetor. And it's the first time I've had that car. Oh man, 6-7 years now. And it's the first time I've ever been broke down. I could have made it home, but it would have been a fire. What it was is that I have the 58-pound fuel pump in the tank, and the regulator up at the front just gave up the ghost. So I was like, man, this thing's running like it's running fat. I pulled over on the side of the road, and then I disconnected the battery because I carry tools because it's a hot rod. And so I disconnected the battery, went in there, turned the key on. I hit the thing on the battery, and I watched fuel come up the vent, hit the hood, and splash. 58 pounds of fuel pressure hit that carburetor. And I was like, yeah.
You mean as sophisticated as the VRS is, it couldn't handle 58 pounds of fuel pressure?
Couldn't handle the fuel. But you want to know what? It did make it across. I had just dropped my daughter off at school, and I made it about half a mile down the road, and it was stuttering. And I was like, man, it was like flooding. Like I had to like kind of like, brake, throttle, and then it died. It started and went across the intersection. It's like, you know what, something's wrong. Let me check it out. I thought maybe it just, because I hadn't tuned it all. I was actually, it was giving his inaugural run, so that way I could start to get some numbers. But the air fuel mixtures were like, it only goes down to 10, and it was at 10. So I was like, ooh, well, it might be a little
You
fat.
might want to change the oil in that sucker too.
Oh yeah. I towed it home. I went home, got the trailer, pulled it in, and then I'm going to change it. It smells like gas.
I'm sure it
smells
does.
like gas. Yeah. So, and that was another reason why I was like, I just, it was about a mile across town to get home, but there's 3 red lights involved there, and I knew I would just flooded it. So, yeah. Huh. Oh, and Colleen, so you sent me a question here, and yes, taller is better for the freeway. You're going to definitely drop the RPM on there, and if he's got 355 gears, try to run as close to like a 29-inch tire as you can. That would definitely help out. And then get like something like a 24 for drag racing if you can. So that would definitely help.
Sorry, I'm getting over some respiratory crap.
Yeah. That's funny you say that because, man, there's been a couple days here where I've just been dragging. Maybe it's just because of the heat, and today was a long day,
Dude, this thing hit me like a freaking, like a ball bat between the eyes. I went to bed feeling fine. I woke up like, oh, and then it was just coming out my nose. My eyes were all boogered up. I'm like, what in the world? And this thing had me down and out in a matter of probably 10 hours.
Yeah. What we do have coming up today, though, is at the Hardcore Tech Talk at 8 o'clock. We are going to mow over one of our listeners, watchers, or
viewers.
Viewers, yeah, that's it, right?
Yes.
Bryce, he's got it's a 505 big block Mopar. It's a low deck, and we'll go into all that later, but he's been having issues with it, and I shouldn't say issues, he was not happy with its performance, and we'll go into that later, but that's going to be at 8 o'clock. We're going to dive into all that.
A video I actually will have coming up here soon is in the Buick realm, headers are freaking stupid expensive, and they only fit pretty much one application, 68 to 72 A body. Mm-hmm. Headers for that 63 Special are really non-existent, and so I will be making my own set of headers. $600 is not reasonable for just a used set of 350 headers, and hopefully they don't fit, or hopefully they do fit. And I know they're not because this thing's got rear steer instead of front steer like the A-body did. So I'm going to make my own headers out of a set of swap meet headers. I actually got 2 sets of swap meet Oldsmobile small block headers, and I'm going to hack them up, and I'm going to make them fit on this 63 Buick Special with just the flanges from TE Performance. And then I got some aftermarket collectors from, they were used from the same swap meet, but they're header, or they're Hookman, oh my God, Hedman collectors, race collectors that are 2-inch, right? So the 2 into to like 3.5, I think. This thing's going to be stupid gnarly if it actually works. So
that's awesome. That we did the same type of thing one time, is that we didn't have headers for a big block Mopar, and so we went down to the swap meet. This is back when they had the swap meet in San Diego, and we bought some Circle Track small block Chevrolet headers, and they're basically 2 together, 1 out,
right.
And we spread them out, made them into a square port, and we welded them into a flange. We just bandsawed them right off, and then put them into a big block, and it worked.
I'm going to use my death wheel. I'm just going to cut the headers right off at the flange for the Oldsmobile. And that's the good thing about like Chevrolet small block. You have to look at your application, but if you have a Siamese exhaust port in the center,
it'll work.
The only thing that's different is the spacing, right? Mm-hmm. So it's bore spacing that dictates where the other ports are at.
Yeah.
And so on the small block Buick, it's got the smallest bore spacing out of all the 350, so they all have to move in. You already have enough material there from everything else to just move them inward. And you can literally just still buy a fairly cheap set of blackjack small block Chevrolet headers, and if you have that Siamese center port, just get some flanges for whatever you're working on, cut it off, and then just add or subtract to make it fit.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even get the blackjacks. You can actually get some decent exhaust from like Racer's Junk or even eBay, and then cut them off something that's a little thicker gauge, because those blackjacks, man, they're pretty thin. They're hard to weld.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, they goes right through it. I've done that. I know. They're hard to weld. As we're waiting for our first Tech Talk question, man, we haven't gotten it yet.
Yeah, surprisingly.
Yeah.
Hey, tonight's Tech Talk. You guys can ask tech questions. This is what
Hello.
this is all about.
Hello?
Yeah. Hello, Internet. Add us a couple tech questions, please.
Yeah, right. Oh, man. Yeah, but today they were talking about the heat, but man, it was more like humid, and I think it was just a little warm for me inside of a building that was un-AC'd. I think I'm just a little tired today,
Oh.
So I'm drinking a little extra water here.
Well, I was actually planting some geraniums or whatever that is. Gardenias. That's what I was planting. Planting gardenias.
Yeah.
And then mulching in the whole 9 yards. I'm trying to keep myself busy to keep my mind occupied.
Hey, there's a question here for you. Dallas, did you collect the GoFundMe?
No, I didn't even know there was a GoFundMe for me.
Yeah, that was for the AHRA.
No, I didn't even know there was a GoFundMe.
Yeah.
Maybe I should go look at GoFundMe and see if there's
You
something
should probably
set
go
up.
look at that, because I think most people donated to it. I think we just listened to your password, and I think we're gonna,
Yeah, well, 1, 2, 3, 4 isn't hard to figure out.
3, 2, 1. All right.
Spot Fund? No, that's not where I wanted to go. GoFundMe official site.
Yeah. So check it out.
Let's see. How do you find for individuals? Search.
Okay. So for tech, does a backseat count as a partition for a gas tank in a trunk? Well, pretty much, because
That was Mustang Mike did that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
someone did
Mustang. Yeah, Mustang Mike did that.
it. Yeah.
Jupiter Mustang.
Yeah, so for the in my Dart, it literally is just the back seat that is the partition. So that is on my Darts. That's exactly how it is for a gas tank. Now, if you have a fuel cell, you do have to put something up, like a steel or a piece of aluminum between there and there. And the back seat is definitely not a partition, because then that becomes a sponge for the fuel. So yeah, and that would make fire fun, sponge good. So yeah, no way, no.
Yeah, fuel sponge directly behind the driver. Not a good thing.
Not a good thing. Yeah, take second, you'd be black and you'd be done. So yeah, you got to have at least something there. Yeah, there was a few people who would fail in that. They would actually just take their. Have you seen the ones that are the factory ones are like particle board, and they would spray paint that black, and then they would put their seat back there, and they would have a fuel tank in the back, and you're like, dude, no, that's a no-go. Yeah. Hey, Mr. Wilson showed up here. Mr. Wilson, it's so hot my underwear is all sweaty. Well, yeah, I would agree so.
How about one up from that? Is that your first tech question of the night?
Right here?
My stock 72 318 idles, but when you give it gas more than halfway, it stalls.
Usually,
It's probably your accelerator pump there.
I was going to say it's accelerator pump, and it's probably not pumping, or
the power piston stuck in the carburetor.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's stuck down, right? So when it gets off of the gas that you give it from the accelerator pump, there's nothing there.
Yeah, it's all done. Or I've seen this before too, where they have they'll have it plugged into full manifold. Now I know we did this whole thing, but if your car's set up to run unported and you put that in there and you get in too much throttle halfway, it just pulls out too much timing and it's done. You just no go.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the very first one. But yeah, I would check on a 318, dude. If that's a 2-barrel, more than likely that's the BBD style. And I was having issues with those too. That's a really funny carburetor. It's got these like this little plate that kind of goes up and down with this
Don't
little
those
rocker.
have like inherent lean spots in them?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's what I was going to say.
Like you can't tune them out.
No. You either deal with the lean spot in the low end or in the top end.
That's
You
what I
just
thought. I
basically
think
move
it's
around.
right off the transfer slot is where it has an immediate lean spot.
Yeah, and I was actually seeing that in my Slant 6, and I went and got a 318 carburetor, put it on my Slant 6. That cured it, but then it was fat everywhere else, so
Yeah.
it was just too much fuel, and I couldn't do anything. So I went and found some jets that we drilled out, and we kept drilling them out different, and then we were polishing the rods to try to find that happy medium. We just never got it out. And then I went to the Holly 2 barrel and
Forgot all about the
it
VBD.
solved all that problem, right? Yeah. Yeah, so we're still waiting for some tech questions here, but that another thing too that is I'm hoping to have this A500 and in this the Green Dart before we go to Sykeston also.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, then and in 355 gears, so that would be a little bit more fun because that means I'll be able to like go down the track instead
The
of like,
A500 is the one that's based off the 904, right?
yes. Yep.
So it's a light rotating mass.
It just has basically an overdrive stuck on the back of it. The overdrive hangs out the back.
Oh,
And-
really?
Yeah, so it's
Oh, that's good. It's kind of like a gear vendor's because what happens is when it's internal of the transmission, you get so much rotating mass.
Yep, exactly.
That it doesn't really help you in a low horsepower or low torque application. When it's out there on the output shaft, it actually takes less rotating mass than a regular overdrive.
yeah, and it's still kind of long, but it's much more compact than like say putting a gear vendor on the back, especially when you're dealing with a Slant 6 and you're dealing with low numbers already. So I'm looking forward to that. And at 355 gear, plus I have that really small tire. It's a 23.2 diameter tire. It's like a 255 50/15. It's a tiny little thing. That should definitely help that thing. And I'm hoping, I was running 1050s last time. I'm hoping, I'm going to bring a bunch of carburetors with me and I'm going to try them all. I'm hoping to get, if I can get out of the 10s, that would be awesome. That would be really bitching.
Well, 38 POS Racing says, is there a drawback having the fuel filter backed by the fuel tank in a mechanical pump carb application?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
you don't want to do that. You want to keep the filters on this side of the pressure side.
The far side of the pump.
Yeah, you do not want to have anything on the vacuum side where it's actually sucking it up. You want to put nothing on that side of it. Always put it on the other side of it because then it's under pressure. So you don't want to have anything obstructing the actual fuel coming in.
Well, plus the mechanical pumps, they only draw like, let's say, 2 inches of vacuum. Okay, They don't draw a lot of vacuum. The further you get away from the pump, the worse it is because it had the more surface area inside the line. So if you have that, let's say you put your filter all the way in the back by the tank, okay, it might have 1 inch of vacuum by the time you get back to your filter, and then when it meets that large volume inside that filter, now it's probably a quarter of an inch of vacuum trying to pull fuel through there, and you'll never get anything through it.
Never get it through there. Yeah, it just sucks. Yeah, it just, and also too, if you get under hood temperatures or under car temperatures too high, that's when you're going to get a vapor lock piece because it's under vacuum, and then all that fuel builds pressure, and they'll just never go. Yeah. All right. So Colleen says our 318 is 32 degrees, all in. It idles at 750, but smells fat. She's happy though. Thoughts? 32 is a little on the light side.
Well, hold on.
What's that?
32. Look how fat it is, though. Right? The fatter it is, the faster the fuel burns.
Yes.
Right?
No. Yeah.
So
no, I got you.
I bet you if they go more than that, it starts to spark knock. But I agree with Shane. If you got that air fuel ratio dialed in correctly, it should be around 34 to 36 degrees.
Yeah, that's always the happy medium. Everything I've ever done 318, 360 with the rod to stroke ratios on theirs, 34 to 36, depending on your tune, is going to be perfect.
If it's burning your eyes, you can almost guarantee. If it smells fat at an idle, okay. Remember, the idle circuit has nothing to do with your jet size generally.
That's right.
Okay, that's just idle mixture. Now, if it smells fat and when you're driving it around, you can almost automatically say you can drop down 1 jet size, and it'll probably be even happier.
Yeah.
And that's what you'll find is when it's fat, it'll actually have pretty good torque right off the idle, but then everything else is lazy. Okay, and that's because you got a lot of fuel in there. It's fat. Now, if you lean that thing out, it's probably going to get much happier, but it'll lose some of that initial off part throttle stuff.
Yeah. But it's more than likely, this is one of her, like, I'm not sure if this is her driver or this is one they're going to be taken to Sykeston, so I'm unsure on that one.
My thoughts would be jet it down. Just go down one jet size and see what happens.
Yeah, why not? I got a book. I got those little tuning books. I'll send you one. I'm assuming this is an Edelbrock 750. I'm assuming that. If it is, I got the books for it. I'll send you out a book.
Look at Dean Stevenson's question right below that.
Yeah, that's actually what I was grabbing. Boom. Dean Stevenson, why do people use switch pitch torque converters rather than
Why don't people use switch pitch torque converters rather than pickup clutches and overdrive automatics? Seems to a torque converter that varies from 1600 on the fly is a great idea. It is a great idea. The problem is the limited availability of them now. Remember, they stopped making them in 67.
And the parts.
The parts are really hard to come by. Switch pitches is something that went away. It's to tell you the truth, I think it should have been something that came into its own when you're looking at these drag and drive events. Okay, but I think a lot of people are unaware of them. And then there's only a few places that will blow one of them converters apart and re-angle the blades so that you can either have a high stall or low stall, or you can use a ST300 torque converter and then modify it. But they're just so few and far between anymore. You don't have a lot of options. The one thing I always wanted to do would have been make a switch pitch 2-speed turbo 400. And then use the ST300 torque converter in it that's meant to be behind like a 300 cubic inch or even a 225 V6 Buick in a 64, 65, 66 Skylark. If you use one of those torque converters with a 2-speed turbo 400 and then put a gear vendors behind that, that would be pretty much the drag and drive transmission that would be most ideal.
Yeah, that would be good. But then... yeah, the thing is, though, is when you're driving down the road, that would the only thing we suck.
Low stall. Yeah, you go low stall. Well, no, you put a gear vendors on it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
2-speed turbo 400 with the gear vendors is like unbreakable.
Yeah. Right. D150 says on the street 383 D100 500 horse 550 torque. Does the overdrive manual have a chance to live just having fun? I do have an 11-inch puck style clutch. What overdrive transmission is this? Is this like a...
No, I think this is an 833 manual, right, with an overdrive, because it's a truck transmission, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. I'm assuming that it's
That's what I'm kind of getting from this. Does the overdrive manual have a chance to live having fun? So it'd be the 833 overdrive.
Overdrive. Okay, yeah.
I would say it would probably live because it is actually the same transmission that they used behind big block Dodges and the super stock class, right? But
now they had two different ones in those. They had the cast iron, and they had an aluminum case on those.
Oh,
so if it's an aluminum case, no way. I don't.
I think it would probably live depending upon what gear ratio you had in the rear end of that truck. If it's like a 256, probably not long.
Yeah, but that torque is pretty high, and those things didn't really like to live. That's why the 833, the Hemi box had those. It had different parts inside of it. So just for that, and that aluminum one will just pull apart.
Now I know first and second would probably handle that just fine. To be honest with you, it'd be third and fourth that would have the worst part, because the way those work is, all right, Dodge was really, really smart when they did this overdrive. Okay, it's the same transmission that they used in the earlier cars. Mm-hmm. But what they did, first and second is the same. Third gear is technically fourth gear. Okay, yep. So there's a huge drop between second and third. It's technically, that third gear is technically, all they did was flip the shift fork in there upside down or backwards. And when you put it into third, it technically puts it into what was originally fourth, which would be 1-to-1. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then when you put it in the fourth gear, it's actually moving that shifting fork the opposite direction, and it puts it in third, which is a new cut gear, which is 0.78 to 1, I think, overdrive.
It's overdrive.
Yeah, and that's where you're going to have a huge step from second to third. And if you watched any of Tony's Bottle Rocket stuff, that's what that car had in it. And it was just like you had to be all in at second gear.
Yeah.
Or that 318, even on the spray, didn't have enough beans to really make that third gear pull because it went from, what did it go from? Like, what's first gear on those things? Probably like a
270 something?
it might be 290, 270, somewhere around there. And then so second gear would have been like 143, you know. It might have been a little bit lower than that, you know, like 173. And then it went to 1-to-1. And it's just a huge step in between there. And the reason why I say you'd have to be all in is think about it, that his 318 and that Bottle Rocket would have to be up at like 7,500.
Yeah.
So that when you pulled third gear, it would drop down to something you could actually use, right? It might be like 4,500 or $5,000.
Yeah. So Patrick was saying the same type of thing. Hi D150, it's aluminum case. OD, he even says what I said. No way. Maybe the cast iron would live. Yeah, it would just. The problem with this is when you pull third gear, there's so much torque, it would probably just pull the case apart in the aluminum.
Not that high in the gear ratio. So what you're looking at when you spread the gears like that happens at like normally first to second. Okay.
Yeah, but the torque, I'm going from second, like you're RPMing it, and then with with the 550 foot-pounds of torque, I understand what you're saying. You're going to kill some of the torque because you're having to turn that 1-to-1 ratio.
No. What I'm getting at is that, okay, when you're looking at transmissions, manual transmissions, what kills them is it spreads the case because of torque multiplication, right? Your 550 foot-pounds of torque, it would be a bit rough on that thing in first gear if you were just dumping the clutch, okay?
Yes.
But when you go each individual gear up, right, it has less ability to spread that case.
Yes.
All right.
In a factory application, yes.
Right, and I think it really wouldn't hurt it if you weren't dumping the clutch on it in first gear. You're probably going to live just fine if you just drive it like it should be driven. Now, if you start power shifting it from first to second, that baby ain't going to live long.
Yeah, the biggest one where I had all my manual transmissions fail in the Chryslers, the A33s, was when I would go into third gear.
Really?
But remember, yeah, it's where the third gear lies inside of the shaft, and it's because it's the farthest away from any support, so it's trying to pull it away. But because it's now reversed in the overdrive, it would be closer to the back because it would be the direct drive.
It'd be where third gear used to be, but it's overdrive.
Yeah, that would be overdrive, so then it'd be fourth gear's in the back. So
it's closer to the back. It'd be stronger.
Yeah. It'd probably be a little stronger. Yeah, I just now was thinking about that. But yeah, but third gear is always what killed those boxes. That's why a lot of people
1-2 would be like really hard on that box.
Yeah, and they're up near the front, and that's like the strongest that I've noticed on those. That's why a lot of guys went to the Ford top loaders, is because that second gear, second to third gear on the Chryslers would just literally explode. And that's where they would break. Yeah, that's actually why I have that top loader out there, is because it's that same thing. Is I got rid of the A833 box, I went to the top loader for when I built a gasser. So
nice to know.
Yeah. See right here. There's a reason no one uses the aluminum case for the performance. Yeah, it would just split. Okay, first responder garage. Chrysler did the same thing on the 454RE and the 545RE. They used two different overdrives. One ratio was 0.75 and the other one was 0.67. Just depends on what programming you had. I knew that, but I didn't know that it was just on the programming. I didn't know that. I just thought it was just the gears that they had set up for the overdrive. Did not know that. Okay. Here we go. Unfinished project. Marketplace, add 383 motor, 383 engine, and 727 Trans Police Interceptor experimental engine. Mopar enthusiast dream. Been sitting for probably 10 years. Ran when taken out. We've all heard that one before. It ran all the way up until I turned the key off. Right? 1970 D250 truck needs rebuilt. Thoughts, dude? I'm all about low deck engines. So. 383s are good engines, man. I dig them. My favorite one's the 400. We've talked about this 100 times, but
that's the B blocks, right? The short deck ones.
Short deck ones. The 400 is my favorite. Big bore, and it's 375 thousandths, I believe, shorter of a deck, and it just reinforces the bore. You know, it's just a better block in general.
The closer you can get the reciprocating mass to the center of the engine, the better it's going to be. Go look at any of the NASCAR stuff, and what you'll find is Cleveland engines, okay, which are a 9.2 deck. They'll have Cleveland blocks that come from the factory from Ford that you can buy that are 9, 8.7, right? The shorter the deck you can get, the better, because it puts more rotating mass toward the center of the engine.
Yeah. Here's Dean Stevenson. He's same with the top loader. He's referring to what I was talking about. It's splitting in third gear. 303 of the Ford T170 SR Overture third is the Demon gear. Yeah, the third gear is the Demon gear. The Ford one does it too, but at a much higher torque rating. Yeah. So you can now, if you ring and faceplate the top loader, you can really kind of do some really bitchin' full throttle launch, shifting with it. But it takes a lot more torque to split that one. Plus, the Ford is just easier to rebuild than over a 55-gallon drum.
The top loader makes it strong, where it's all bolted together.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. It's just the top, right?
Yeah.
And all a top loader means, people are like, oh, it's a top. You just load it from the top. It literally has a plate up on top, and that's all that is.
Instead of having the side cover like a T10 or even the 833, it has all of it up top, and what you have is all the strength is around the sides and the bottom, because that's where it spreads.
Yeah, it's in a bucket, essentially, yeah. So, moving on through, do we have anything? It's kind of a slow night on Tech Talk today.
Yeah. I always wondered what would happen if you were to take like a Ford top loader and then build instead of having that top plate that's just a stamped steel plate, if you made a girdle for that sucker.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was going to do with this one, is I was going to make it like a piece of aluminum, like that was thick, and then bolt it down so that way it reinforced, and then it came around like an actual girdle that came around the side of it. Like it was a piece, and it would hold the case. I was thinking that would be awesome, and plus then the aluminum would help dissipate some of the heat, and I was thinking all that same thing you were just talking about. I was like, yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Okay, right here. I know very little about Fords. I don't speak much Ford, so you speak more Ford than I do. That's what Ford found with the FE experimentals. Chrysler was hugely Hemi influenced, and a 1.8 or something more is what they aimed for until they went low deck. I thought maybe he was talking about Ford FEs or something. Like, I was like, I've rebuilt a few of those, but
he's talking about the lower deck engines. They found that same thing, where the closer they can get to the crankshaft for reciprocating mass, the better it actually was.
Yeah, and they weren't the FEs a skirted block also?
Yeah, it was a deep skirt block. It actually looks like a Buick 350, but bigger.
Okay, so Jonathan Couchy is actually, this is one's for you. You go ahead on this one.
Hey, Dallas. So we finally got the Hot Rod 360 D150 truck quadrajet secondaries running. Problem is they get stuck wide open. Luckily, my brother is quick thinking and cut the ignition. Okay, there's a couple things that cause this. It depends which side is sticking. If it's the throttle blades themselves, you can pull the whole base plate off and then readjust where those throttle blades, because sometimes they'll bind inside that bore, okay? And you just take those screws, just back it out a quarter of a turn or it might even be a half a turn to get it loose, and then move that door to where it's centered, that flap, and then tighten it back down. If it's the air door at the top, because they like to bind too, because what you find is numbskulls a long time ago figured out that if your needle and seat is sticking, to whack the top of the carburetor with a hammer, and that'll make the needle and seat go back in place. The other thing that happens is when people do that is they don't hit the needle and seat, they just whack the top of the carburetor, and it'll ding that cast aluminum, and it'll catch the door, that secondary air door up top. It'll normally misshapen the rest of the air horn, and it'll tweak those air doors. That's the weakest part of it, is those big secondary air doors. You can back those screws off and move the air door around to where it actually smoothly functions and opens. Now, if that's not the problem, if neither one of those is binding, there's a secondary air door spring, okay? And it's located underneath of the secondary air door on the passenger side. And there's a small Allen head screw at the bottom. And what you need to do is loosen that. And then if you look at the rod, there's an adjustment on it. And you can actually turn that thing. And what you'll want to do is add some more spring in so it has tension to close those air doors. And what I normally do is, what you want to do is the way I do it's kind of funky. I just found one that it felt good and it moved well. And then what I did is I put a bunch of nuts on the top of it until it fell open, right? So I got like 5-6 nuts on top of the air door and it would fall open. Okay, so then I would adjust my secondary air door in every carburetor to have 5 or 6 3/8 nuts sitting on top of it until it fell through that secondary air door.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, so...
And then first responders asking the same thing. Yes, the adjustment on the secondary air door can be too loose and it causes them to hang. That's correct.
Yep, there you go. Okay, Bryce Kaufman. Best head for a 340 without having to buy a bunch of one-off stuff. Currently 30 over, 700 lift cam, forged internals, Holley Pro Domino tunnel ram intake. You know, when you define best, what are we doing with this? Is this a
It looks
race
like
car
without
car?
having to buy a bunch of one-off stuff, right? So the
Yeah.
best heads that you could buy, if you were going to go buy the meanest small block Dodge heads,
Without having to buy, and he's already got the intake and all that stuff.
yeah,
I would just go down and get some Performer RPMs.
Performer
what I would do.
RPM is the best one. Is the best you
Well,
can buy at the moment.
For without having to buy a bunch of one-off stuff, so you don't have to buy any factor, one
Weird intake manifold or weird headers or anything like that.
And he's got a Pro Dominator tunnel ram already, so that a factory intake will bolt right onto it. And I'm not sure if the Victor head. I believe the Victor head, Edelbrock Victor head will take a stock intake tunnel ram. I'm not sure on that. I'll have to look into it.
Well, I bet they probably do. I mean, Edelbrock was always about trying to keep the stuff
Yeah.
to where you could use factory parts, right? It's always when you get into the weird things like the W8s and all that, where you got your one-off headers and your one-off intake manifold and all that
Yeah.
weird crap.
Yeah, that's where I would do. Now, when you say best head for, once again, what's the end game? Is this a race car, or is this a hot street car with a tunnel ram in it, or is this a looky-loo car, where you just want to make a bunch of noise, go into the car show, or is this something that's a driver? So, and it does that on here. It says currently has ported W2s on it. Honestly, the ported W2s are probably some of the better heads to have. Those are like the very first race heads that came from any type of factory support, and most of even my 360-1 heads that are on my race car right now are a derivative of a W2 head. So
Well, W2 is what I don't know if everybody's familiar. Bob Glidden ran a Dodge one year, ran a Plymouth Arrow,
Yeah.
right? And Ford pissed him off, and he went over to Dodge, and he built a Plymouth Arrow, and they were running small blocks at the time, and that would have been the head that they ran in Pro Stock. Would have been the W2 head.
yeah,
Now
They
I know
work.
that. Yeah, well, I think that W2 had a staple in drag racing, probably still does.
yeah.
But I know, like, the later stuff, this W8s and all that, is what everybody is freaking drooling over. But, man, if you're using W2 heads, those use factory stuff. How much further can you have them ported?
Well, not always. On the W2s, if they're like an oval port, they take a different type of intake. And
A
but-
W2 does?
Yes, on some of the W2s you have W2, or and then you have the Econos. Now the Econos, I believe, run the factory type of intake, but a lot of them have different types of exhaust depending on what year they are. They have a different type of bolt pattern for those.
Oh, he says it's iron style Econo, I believe.
Okay, so Iron Style Econo, I believe. So that runs all the factory stuff. So I would just stay with the W2s currently right now. Everything else is going to be based off of that. If you want to be able to drive it on the street, but I would try to run the W2s if you can. I mean, does it run right now with the tunnel ram on it? Because if it's the Econos, I believe that they fit right on there.
Man, I don't know. See, in this kind of combination, what are you using it for? Is it drag race only, or is it just street driven? Because
Yeah.
if
You
it's
gotta
street
know.
driven, you got to want something completely different than drag race only, right? And the best thing to do, in my opinion, when you actually reach the pinnacle of a cylinder head, the combination that you're looking at then thereafter, if you don't want to spend the $2,500 or $3,000 for a different set of heads, put a stroker kit in that thing and make as much torque as you possibly can.
Yeah, and then just bring your, instead of your RPM being way up, just bring it into the middle.
Down, yeah.
Yeah,
And it'll make the same kind of power, just occur a lot lower in the RPM band.
Yeah, just use the torque. Use the
Yeah.
work of
Yep.
the engine. We did pass a couple of them here. There was actually another one here for you.
Let's see. One of the secondary lockout linkages broke off and held the secondaries open. Dude, this thing sounds like a freaking pile. Did we get it right? Is it together correctly? We then broke the tranny lines by a belt flopping, and the sound made us think we threw some rods. Okay. Well, you need the secondary linkages, the lockout linkages, to work correctly, or the Quadrajet becomes your Quadrabog. I mean, that's mandatory. You have to have all those linkages working correctly, especially like your choke pull-off stuff, because it won't, even if it's, well, I don't know, the secondary lockout linkages. It'll allow the secondary air door to come open when it's cold, and that's what'll happen. But you can, if you pull the base plate and it's hanging up on the base plate, just throw the lockout linkage on there. I mean, it's just an L-shaped bracket, and it just catches that the pin on the secondary air door, or on the secondary butterflies. So I'd fix that, and then I'd probably go back out and see what I could do. The way I test them all is I zip tie the lockout so the secondaries can't come open, and I tune the front two barrels first, and I get it as best as I can. And then once I get it as best as I can, then I play with the secondaries to make it come in and add fuel. Like what I'll do is I'll normally put a set of large metering rods in there and flood it first, and then I'll just keep dropping it down. And then you play with it when the door opens, and then adds in your secondary metering rod. But Bryce Kaufman says they're ported to the point I have to use a sealer to keep them from weeping. All right, so you got nothing left, dude. You need to start looking at adding cubes.
And not only that too, but if those are going to be cast iron, so this way, if you go to an aluminum, you can go up one full point of compression, and it's not going to hurt anything because you're going to dissipate the heat, and then you'll be able to build a little bit more. And then he says right after that, it was a race-only engine. Trying to put it on the street, I'm difficult, but it's either a race engine or it's not.
Okay, so I tried this before, right? And there's only one way to successfully do it: build a really good street engine and put a bunch of nitrous on it, right?
Absolutely.
And then if you continue to try to serve two masters, you're never going to make a naturally aspirated engine run the way it's supposed to. Trying to serve two masters, you will literally pull your hair out trying to balance everything, and it'll never run right, even in a street configuration or a drag strip configuration. It'll never run good.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree with that 100%. You just basically put nitrous on it if you want to be both. First responder, comparing two heads. One head flowing 225 with 19 valves. The other flows 260 with 23-degree valves. Which one has more potential for late torque? All the variables being the same. I'm assuming he's meaning 19 degrees.
Yes, that's what he's saying.
Yeah, 19 degrees.
Your 260 heads are, no matter what, are going to outflow those. It doesn't matter about the valve angle. If you're reading it and that's a number from a flow bench, it has no idea what the valve angle is. It's telling you the true number right there.
Yeah, and if you go by valve diameter, that might change a little bit because the one's going to be shrouding the valve more, the other one's going to be shrouding the valve a little less. That would be different. But if the 260 is flowing 200, that's going to be a better flowing head, and the 23-degree valve.
If you guys want to, if you want to know that the simple way to look at this, that flowing number, that right there, as long as that's a 28 inches of vacuum, you can almost double that number, and that's the potential that cylinder head for horsepower can make.
Yeah, so one's like, 520, the other one is a lot less. So, yeah.
Yeah, 450.
50, yeah, exactly. So, there's the difference right there.
But he says, which one has more potential for late torque?
Well, see, you don't know. There's no way, because you would need to know bore size, you need to know Valve, you need to know quench.
Camshaft, you need to know a lot of it. But
yeah,
if you're just looking at the cylinder head with that number right there,
then there would be no difference between these two numbers right here.
The one that would have the most potential for late torque would probably be that 260 degree with 23 degree valves.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Or 260, yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't flip. I would just look at the one that has the most flow. Would be the one that would make the
late torque.
Later torque, yeah, because the 225 is basically going to hit the velocity faster, and so therefore it's going to make that really torque.
Really early torque. That 225 would be an excellent street head, to be honest with you.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, if he told us, like, everything else, rod length, because that would tell us dwell, how fast is it moving here and there. There's a lot of factors that go into that, so that's why I wanted to be very careful on answering that one. Okay, Jonathan Kelsey says, we fixed it now, Dallas. The lockout pin wasn't adjusted right. Now everything is working fine. We need to remove one throttle spring and tighten the throttle now. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Did you just do that right now?
I'm just telling you, like, when you go to tune this thing, put that lockout in there, zip tie it into place, and then tune the front two barrels. Once you get the front two barrels working right, then play with the secondaries. That's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah. Start one, make one change at a time, too.
Yeah.
I used to maybe, I know what it needs. I make all the changes and realize it was just the timing was off, and I was like, oh, why did this do this? Yeah. David James. Oh, that's the first time I've seen that name. Awesome. Thanks for watching. 70 in the front, 80 in the rear for 440. Are these numbers for carbs jets sounding right? It's an 850 CFM Holley 410 Sport. Thank you. Okay. They sound okay,
in the ballpark.
They're in the ballpark. As far as that goes, you would really need to look at your plugs and also to your power valve.
That's what I was just going to say. That
power valve is going to be about 8 to 10 numbers normally, so that's the reason why. but also too, it really depends, because if it's a absolute square bore, then it's going to be the 8 numbers. But sometimes they're not exactly square,
Well, okay, my little bit of Holley knowledge here is what I learned last year just trying to get that Superstock motor to run on the stand correctly. And I put a 950 CFM quick fuel on a 364 cubic inch small block Buick, and it was not happy, but it still worked. So I don't have a lot of knowledge with these, but okay, generally the rule of thumb, I think, is 6 jet sizes bigger from the front to the rear. Okay, but if you have the blocked off power valve in the rear, then it's 10.
Yeah, 8 to 10. Yep.
Yeah, so I would say, you're probably in the ballpark, but you're, just like Shane says, you're going to have to start it up, and you can't just look at the plug as it's sitting there idling. What you're going to have to do is drive it around, and then look at the plug. And what you'll really want to do is how you do plugs. If you really want to be a professional plug reader, this is how you do it. You would have brand new fresh plugs in that thing, start it up and drive it, let's say a mile, shut it off, pull the plug, right? Pull a plug, and then you would, technically what you're supposed to do is cut the whole entire end of it off, the steel, the threads in, and then you can look at the entire ceramic all the way down, okay? So what you're looking for is, if you're trying to read plugs on your electrode, if it burns halfway through to the back strap, right? It's right at the curve of the back strap. Your timing is correct.
Yep.
Okay. If you have it too fat, what'll happen is, if you have that ceramic and you cut the threaded portion of it off with like a saw or a cutoff wheel, and then you look at the ceramic, it'll be black from the top down, right? And now it'll start lightening up as it gets toward the bottom. What you want is gray at a minimum, because then you're within 1 or 2 jet sizes. And tan. It actually looks like the perfectly toasted marshmallow when you get the perfect air fuel ratio set up for it. But
caramel,
you can only drive it literally that 1 mile. Stop, pull the plug, right? Don't try to drive it back home. Don't feather the throttle. Don't do anything other than just that one quick jaunt for about a mile. Yeah. And what a lot of guys do at the track is if they're trying to read plugs and they're trying to get the combination dialed in, they'll run a whole set of plugs. The motor will be cold. They'll fire it up, do the burnout, go up to the line, put it up on the rev limiter or the box or whatever they got, let her eat, and when you get down to the other end, hit the ignition switch, coast around till you shut it off, pull all the plugs out, put 8 new plugs in to drive you back to the pits, and then read all 8.
Yeah. Also, too, as far as the power valve goes, you really have to put a vacuum gauge on there to see what the engine's pulling at idle before you can even discuss power valves. 4.5 seems a little light, but
It
once
is
again,
light.
I don't know your engine setup. Usually 6.5 is normally the starting point because most engines are going to pull at a performance about 13 inches at idle. 4.5 would be something that would be pulling about 9 inches. That's where I
And
would start.
that's the problem. So look at it, 4.5 power valve stumbles just after part
part
throttle.
throttle.
So that's the top power valve coming open and open up your secondaries literally right off idle, or at part throttle.
Yeah. So
You need a stronger power valve, I think.
yeah. So just put a vacuum gauge on there, put it on the manifold, and
Actually,
just put it sideways.
No, it's 10 jet sizes different. Block it off. Put a block off in it.
Yeah.
right?
To see if it doesn't stumble. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just make sure that stumbles right after part throttle. Okay. Also, too, check your accelerator pump. Make sure that that's actually working correctly. Because if it
Or is it
stumbles,
engaging? Yeah.
yeah. Because I've seen those too where that's not really hitting it right, and then someone's changed the cam for
The
like a
cam.
smaller engine. Yeah. Make sure that it's not flat on there. I've seen them too where the cam has gone flat near the end, so there's just no more accelerator pump at the end. So,
He says it's got 10 inches of vacuum at idle, which is actually pretty good if it's.
yeah.
He sits at
pretty
440, right?
Yeah, well, 10 inches. That's a pretty big cam. So his power valve's in the ballpark.
I'd block it off. If you got that much
yeah.
of a difference between the jets, that's normally what you do for a race application is you block that secondary power valve off and you go 10 jet sizes different.
And see what happens. I mean, in my race car, my blue dart, I don't have power valves in either one. I took them out 100% because
Well,
it's either idling or full throttle.
Dean Stevenson saying more primary jet to 76, go to. Now, see, that sounds a little bit more right, and that's. All right, so that the 6.5 power valve means that it opens at 6.5 inches of vacuum, right?
Yeah, so it goes. So basically, yes, it opens at 6.5. So like on my dart, because I'm running a big carburetor, it has very low. I put a low power valve in it, so I would be at like a 2.5. So that way it doesn't open until it's really far down there. So a 6.5 would open sooner, essentially.
Yeah, but all he's doing is correcting for having a power valve in the secondary,
Yeah.
and then moving the jet size within the parameter for being 2 different power valves. Right now, the way you got it set up is ideal for having a blocked off secondary power valve, right?
Yeah. Oh, so maybe I didn't read that right. So he's got a power valve front and rear.
That's what I'm thinking. It's,
Okay.
And then it's 10 jet sizes difference, right?
Oh,
and
that's-
it's too much.
Yeah, way too much. Okay, that's a whole different game. I thought I just naturally assumed that it was a power valve in the front and blocked off in the back because that's how most of my 750s and 850s are. That are like the
Oh, well, maybe I'm being dumb about this. Maybe it is that way.
because normally they're 10 jet sizes. If you have a power valve in the front
And
then
none in the
power,
rear.
and then none in the rear, that's how you get the 10. So when the power valve's shut off, you can run it basically on the smaller jets, and then when you floor it, that opens up, and that compensates for the 8 to 10 jet sizes that you would have in the backside. Is how the power valve would work.
Yeah, the whole idea behind that is the snappiness, right? When you run a smaller jet in the front, it is generally much more responsive, but it needs more fuel. So that's why you have so much bigger disparity between the front and the rear jets, and it opens immediately when the secondaries are open.
Imagine that as your fuel economizer. That's what your power valve is for. So it will shut off the amount of fuel. It'll shut off 8 jet sizes. So when you're cruising down the road, that's your economizer.
Oh, he's saying there's no power valve in the secondary. Okay.
Yeah. So that sounds about right then. As far as the disparity between the front and the rear, yeah, that sounds
Okay.
about right. 8 to 10 is about what I normally see on those.
Yeah, so then it's stumbling right off part throttle. And
He
he's
says
right. It needs more jet in the primary.
Yeah. And he said brown cam. I believe that's stock. Yeah, I believe that's stock. Yeah, no. Okay, so there it is
Oh,
right
you
there.
know what else it could need? It might need a larger squirter up top.
Well,
I wonder what
that's what I'm
size
saying.
the squirter sizes are.
Yeah, check to make sure that that's adjusted correctly, because a lot of those guys will have a 30 cc in them, and they really need 50s. So yeah, check to see if your
Accelerator
pump. Yeah, they have 30s and 50s. See which one it is. If it's the smaller one, it's the 30. If it's the bigger one, it's the 50.
I'll tell you what. The easy way to do that is get the biggest squirter you can put at the top, and if it still has a stumble, you're gonna have to go up with the accelerator pump.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, here's what it's saying. It is
850Q. It's 850 drag quick fuel, so it's already got the big pumps, or it's got the big accelerator pumps. So it might need a bit of squirter, more squirter up top.
Yeah, if it's a quick fuel, I would just play with the jets then. I wouldn't do anything because those things are already, the quick fuels are already set up for a lot of fuel as far as the accelerator pump. I wouldn't mess with anything on the power valves for right now. I would just basically look at the squirters. He's telling me right here.
Has a 41 squirter on it.
41. That's a good size squirter. So, was this a brand new carb, or was this something that you got used? Because a lot of people change those accelerator pumps. They'll go down to the local parts store and this looks like it, and it's a 30 cc's, and then not a problem right there. Also, too, does it have? If it's stumbling, it might not always be carburetor. It could be timing too. Does it have? Is it got a vacuum advance on it? And what's your timing set up to come all in at? As far as right off part throttle, is it all in at 2500 or what's up? Heathens assemble.
That's Blake from Bad Tree. Hey, I'm wearing my Bad Tree shirt. What's left of it? It's almost. I literally have 5 shirts. Ever since my life has been turned upside down, I've been living up here at the AHRA office, and I have a table that used to be where I assembled everybody's membership packages, just littered with the 5 shirts I have and 5 pairs of shorts and underwear, and so that's where I'm at now. So I've watched this shirt like 47,000 times in the past 4 months.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's funny. See here, if you go with the smaller big pump here, if you go with the small squirrel and the big pump, it will dwell the fuel spray longer. Yes, and that's why I don't tend to mess with the actual squirters themselves, and I just go with the bigger pump, so that way it stays on longer, and it helps that lean spot out, because it will definitely cover up a lot of that stuff. Because when it's full throttle, it's good, but that transfer is where you're going to have most of your problems come in. All right. Well, we're getting almost time to 8 o'clock. Do we got anything else coming on? Nope. Bigger than Taos. What does it say right here? Did we read this one? If you fuse the wire and you can keep the secondaries jets at 10 bigger. Stock PVC are about 63 thousandths. Okay, yeah. All right. And sounds like you need a new one. Hey, Dallas. Sound like you need a new one? You got to PM me your address.
Yeah. I'll have to do that.
But you're not going to need an extra large anymore. You're just going to need a large now, right?
Mine is a limited production, Bad Tree Productions, and then No Name Nationals on the back. I don't know if you can even see it anymore.
No.
Limited production, so I just unlimitedly wear it.
Right.
Yeah, and the last thing I need is more T-shirts. I'm surrounded by T-shirts up here in my office, and I'm going to have to sell them all at the No Name Nationals. So we're going to have a fire sale.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're getting close to 8 o'clock today on Hardcore Talk. We're going to be talking about. He's actually in the chats right now, Mr. Bryce Kaufman, and his engine setup. I'm pretty intimate with this engine. I'm going to guess 2017, 2018, I think. It was the first time I met him. I was working at a different company. He called me up with his engine setup. He was going to run it, but I don't remember if I got any head flow numbers. So I remember I was kind of going blind on that because we didn't have that kind of information. But I do know that it was a big block Mopar. Now I'll just tell you what it's got now. So it's a 400 base 505 stroker. So it's like a 4.362 or 5.2 bore, 4250 stroke, and right now he currently has a 270 heads on it from TrickFlow, and he's ported beyond max wedge. As far as numbers go, you're looking at 300 numbers at lift at about 231, 288 at 400, 325 at 5.6 is 346, and 7 you're looking at 353. On the exhaust side, you're looking at about 186, 221, 244, 256, and 266, which is good numbers. Those are decent numbers. And it's an Indy single plane 4150 style. As far as the intake, now it's been ported and blended to a Dominator style adapter, so it's got one of those 2-inch adapters on it, I'm assuming. He's got springs on it, so he's got 305 on the seat. Now, this is now his current setup, and 825 open Manton series, 3/8 by 145 push rods, upgraded cups. He's got a custom Schneider cam currently right now. Duration at 50 is 270, 278. It's on a 112 LSA installed on a 110 ICL. And as far as lift, now we're not factoring deflection or anything else. You're looking at, with a 1/6 rocker arm ratio, of 686, 688. And the distributor is locked out at 32 degrees, which sounds about right. 11.4 to 1 compression. It's got a step dish piston. Isky solid roller, red zone line whatevers. As far as lifters go, expensive. And I remember when I was talking to him about this, I remember it had 11.4 to 1. I remember all this except for the cylinder heads, I believe, were slightly different, and we had different as far as spring pressures. But his goal is that he was looking for the highest RPM he could drive this with pump gas. And he wanted to bang shifts at close to 7,000 RPM if he could, and whatnot. Now, I didn't have any cylinder head numbers to go with, so I made him, and he wanted something he didn't have to mess with as far as adjustments at the time. So we went with a solid hydraulic roller, and the cam that I made him was, I told him how to set it up. We did it, once again, like I always tell everyone, 20 off the bottom. So that way when he revved it, it would basically act like a solid. We went with a 253 on the intake duration at 50 and a 264 on the exhaust on a 112 LSA. And I had him install this one, I believe, at 108 on the ICL on this one. Now I went with a big separation between the two, so that way you can kind of wind it out the back. And as far as lift, I believe we're in like the 650 range. Yeah, 648, 643, because there was really not much more spring I wanted to put in that thing, because I think he had like 150 on the seat and like 350 as far as over the nose. So that was years ago, and I remember he did a dyno on this, and the engine made at 6,000 and 6,100, made 741 horse, and that was it parabolic right there at 6,000, 6,100, and then by 6,400 it had dropped down to about 731. So it was holding on at 62, 63, 64. By 65 it was falling on 725. So it was on its way out at that point. As far as torque goes, you're looking at right at the 49 to 5,000 range. You're looking at 692, 694, 693, right in that range, all the way to 5,100. So it had good torque, and it had really good street mounters, because this was basically set up for a 93 octane. And I remember he was happy with it, but he wasn't happy with the RPM. So then that was when I was in San Diego. Fast forward to 2021, I believe. He decided he wanted to do a different setup. So then he calls up another cam company, I believe it was Schneider, and he got a cam, the 270, 278 on a 112, and they put it on a 110, and now this guy had airflow numbers to go with it. And on this setup, it made, sorry, it's at an angle, I apologize, 6,100, it made 713 horsepower. But remember, this AFR, this thing was running really lean. It was like 14.97. So I believe if it had the air fuel mixture correctly, it would have made
40 more horse.
Yeah, exactly. So it would have been at the same horsepower, and you'll understand where I'm going with this in a minute. And as far as torque goes, the solid made about 700 at Oh, I'm trying to read
But
this out.
see, there's one thing that you're throwing out there that already gives the answers. It's
not
all
yet.
the numbers are all occurring at the same RPM.
Exactly. So 700 at 4,700 RPM. So what I did is I had a little conversation with Mr. Bryce before we came on here. So what I tell everyone to do is you can get desktop dyno nowadays. You can get it cheap. Don't look at the numbers. You can get desktop dyno. You can put in everything you want inside there, and just look at the trends. What is the camshaft doing? So here's what I'm saying is that between a hydraulic and then a solid, the engine literally made the same power, technically, the same power at the same RPM with two different camshafts that were basically set up wildly different. So what does that tell you? That tells you there's one variable that's happening. It doesn't have enough cylinder head. It needs more cylinder head, a lot more cylinder head. This thing is a 505 cubic inch, and the cylinder head is flowing, like I was saying, 350. Now, there's two ways to compensate for this. You can add a whole ton of camshaft, or you can just get more cylinder head. Now, so
There's
what I
actually
did,
3 ways to go. You
What's
can
that?
decrease cubic inch.
or you can decrease cubic inch. Yes, you can take the crank. Yes, you are correct. But a lot of people have spent the money for that. So, it's funny that you say that because I actually already did that. So I went basically with the stock 400. So if you stay with the stock 400 crank, but you leave the same numbers, so 3.31 there, and then you keep everything exactly the same, it makes the exact same horsepower, but now it's making it at 7,700 RPM. So the exact same setup that you have right now, you put your stock crank back into it, the exact same setup. Obviously, you have to change pistons and whatever, but leave the camshaft alone that it is right now. You would be able to bang shift that thing at 75 to 8,000 RPM. Here's the thing, though, is that now your peak torque is up near 6,000, and then there is really nothing below 2,500 on this thing. It is literally just a dead dog. So that's the reason why you have the torque. Now, for your setup, I told him that he would be happy. And there's actually someone came up in here, Bigfoot in Mopars, is saying his 270s made 723 horse based on his 512. So it is not. This is in line with everything that everybody's having, because that's exactly. If you gave us the RPM, that would definitely help Bigfoots, because that way we would just kind of prove this point a little bit more. So I did also camshaft. I went up to 288, 300 on a 114 LSA, and it only moved the horsepower up from 6,100 to 7,100. So, but the problem is, though, is now you just move your torque curve up another 1,000 RPM. So once again, you have an engine that is literally undrivable on the street, and it's just a top end engine. So there's really no trade-off, but there is one trade-off. Get some better cylinder heads. You can run the exact same setup that you have right now, and if you added, let's see here, pull this back up. If you added just if you added 50 more CFM on the current setup that you have right now.
On the intake side?
Yes, I'm sorry, on the intake side, and then obviously the same corresponding on the exhaust, as far as, 50 CFM on the exhaust, because I would just be bigger on that point too. You would bring that power from 6,100 up to 7,500, and you would keep the peak torque at the same point. It just becomes fatter because you're carrying the torque out longer because it's got more head. And because it's a big engine, it will basically swallow that up. So, and he's asking me a question right here. So this is actually probably getting into my next point as far as carburation. Do you believe that there is a benefit to getting rid of the 4150 with the adapter and going to a straight Dominator in flange gasket? That's funny you say that, because that was my next point, is that on my small block, I had a Dominator on it for a while, and I had one of those adapters on it. Even with the maximum porting out on it, when it came down to a funnel and then it splayed back up, I was getting odd fuel distribution between the cylinders. when I took that off and I put just a 2-inch spacer with the 4150 style, not the 4500 Dominator, it didn't change the power. It actually made a little less power, but I was getting better distribution in the fuel. So it made better overall power. So it made less peak, but it made better overall power, and that's the reason why I went with that.
Well, when it necks down like that, that's why I never liked those adapters. When it necks down, it actually creates a faux Venturi, right?
Yes. Now you have 2 Venturis to go through.
Right. And what it's doing in there is actually redistributing your fuel based on which runner is pulling the most.
Yeah, right. And especially if you're running, like, say, a stock firing order, the 5 and 7 fire right next to each other, where the 5 would fire first and the 7's in the back. That's exactly where I was having my problem. 1, 8, 6, 5, 4, 3, 7, 2, and then 7 was on the back, and then 2 was on the front. And those 2 right there had a very huge problem as far as getting the fuel distribution with the far 2 corners from each other. So, as far as, Bryce, what's going on with your combination is that, I'll tell you right now, you just need more. If you want to bang shifts at 7,000 RPM, you just need a bigger head. You just need bigger head flow. But it definitely will hurt some of your lower driving performance because your velocity in your head's going to go away. But for what you have right now, and I'm looking at your numbers currently right now, with your setup right now that you have, that thing at now the graph starts at 4,300. It's making 673 foot-pounds of torque at 4,300. I would be good with that. That means that this one here is doing the same type of thing as far as the trends that I have. And even all the way down to 2,000 RPM, that thing's still making 450 foot-pounds in that range-ish. Foot-pounds of torque. So that's a driver. That's something you can leave literally in 3rd gear and drive around town, and it's going to have plenty of stump-pulling torque to get out of its way. And if you like that RPM thing, go back to a small block. I don't know, man. What's your thoughts on this, Dallas?
My thoughts are, really, when you're talking big cubic inch, you do not want to get them in that kind of RPM.
That's what I was telling him. Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's got a great setup the way it is right now. People would be stoked.
That sounds like an excellent freaking street strip motor.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
It's going to be one brutal bastard in town, and then like at the track, there's probably nothing to really scoff at because I bet it probably runs pretty good. That's how my 427 cubic inch cleaver is. I only spin that sucker up to $7,000, and it's actually all in at 6,400, I think. But it does carry out quite a few hundred RPM where it just levels off. But it's because of the camshaft. It's very, very docile in the thing.
Yeah, and this one here, too, I'm looking at his numbers. That's why my head's all crooked. 713 horsepower at 61. But, I mean, it's still at 700 at 63. So even if he started to shift, like, say, at 59 and power shifted right through to 63 and he has 1,000, let's just say 1,000 RPM drop, he's dropping down to 5,000, which is literally right at peak torque. So he's at 700 foot-pounds of torque.
That's actually a really good setup.
Yeah, it's a great setup.
For a stick shift car?
For a stick shift car, yeah.
This would be a really healthy stick shift combo.
Yeah, and here's the graph. I would almost want him to go back to the hydraulic roller so that way he doesn't have to have spring pressures as far as...
you know what? You can gain RPM out of decreasing the mass on the valve train, right?
Yes,
so
exactly.
I bet if you want to spin this thing harder, you go to something lighter valve train setup.
We're gonna go full John Wilburn here, and so see here. So you can see. Can you guys see that pretty good?
Yeah.
That's the dyno of the hydraulic roller. So 3,500 RPM, it goes down a lot lower. It's making 554 foot-pounds of torque, and it just goes up from there. And you can see their air-fuel mixture. Now, there was a problem with the Lambda, I guess is what he was saying before. That's the reason why it seems to be a little fat. But
it gets super fat around.
Yeah, but I think it's just shut off.
4,500, 4,700.
Yeah, at 5,000. Yeah, 5,000 it gets really fat. But I mean, if you look at that horsepower, I mean that's 6,000, 6,100, 741. That's a good number. That's a good. I would be happy with that. And then, if you guys want to know the camshaft, if you go to as far as the hydraulic roller, so this way you know the setup. Down after this is done,
Well, the only difference between a hydraulic roller and a hydraulic or a solid roller is the RPM capability of the valve train, right?
exactly. And since he's only going to 6100, I'd put the hydraulic back in it, cut down on the spring on the valve train, so that way you're less wear on parts because he doesn't want to be working on this thing. When he talked to me about this the first time, and I set up this camshaft for him, he was like, "Man, I just want to be able to get in it, bang gears, run it." So these masters that are on here are not very fast masters. They're very they're, I guess you would call.
Well,
them
if he
now-
went back to hydraulic roller, right?
Uh-huh.
And then I don't know if there's any way to lighten the valve train. And he's got Manton push rods, and I'm sure they're freaking more than extra stout for that 325 over the nose spring, right? When you go down to that smaller spring, try to run the lightest spring you can get away with,
Yep.
and then decrease your push rod size diameter, and you'll probably pull, I don't know, if you can get 10 to 20 grams out of there.
Yeah. Because if you run, say, 150 on the seat, and I remember, I think the
that's-
specs were 3.
Well, remember I
350
did this on
over
that Super Stock Buick. I went to the Beehive valve spring that has a real small retainer,
Yes.
right?
Cut down the
And
mass, yeah.
and I cut down all the extra weight that I possibly could out of the valve train, and that way I wanted to get it. It wasn't that it was going to rev faster, or I'm sorry, it wasn't going to rev higher. It was going to rev quicker because there's less mass
Yeah, exactly.
to get up to inertia, right? So what I did was I played around with the valve spring, the size, and I talked to Shane, and it was like we went to it's either a conical or a Beehive valve spring I went to,
Yeah,
but
it's
the
a
retainer was
Beehive.
rinky dinky. I mean, super small.
It was half the mass too, as far as the retainer
Yeah.
and the locks were half the mass of what that. And then you went to a lighter valve too, so we picked up with the same setup. You picked up, I think it was 400 RPM with the same amount of weight.
Well, I pulled
because-
30 grams out of the valve
Yeah.
train weight,
yeah.
right? After all that
and that's
stuff.
on top. That was up on top. Yeah.
Right. So, and that equates to like 400 or 500 RPM capability, just because the spring was the minimum spring I could run, right, with that combination, and that was what the whole idea was really blueprinting the valve train out, not for robust heavy dutiness, but for lightweight, but yet reliable. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so after this cast, what I'll do is I'm going to post up. I already cleared this with. I mean, he was totally cool with this. I'm going to post up his build numbers, his cylinder head, the hydraulic cam. It's part number F as in Frank 23255. Once again, that's F 23255. You can go to the Crower site, click it up. Any comp cams can make the same cam for you, and
You know what, Shane? I would probably go back to that hydraulic roller cam.
yes,
Put the solid roller lifters on it because they're going to be lighter, right?
yes, they would be lighter.
And then run the lightest push rod, retainer, rocker arm, spring combo I could.
Well, the only thing though is if he did that, I would have him send me back the camshaft. I would profile it so that where I could tell him where to set his lash at. I know it'd be somewhere between 6 and 8, maybe even 4 to 8, because it's a pretty docile as far as profile, as far as the hydraulic roller. But this way, if he didn't want to play with that as far as the lash, but then he could go way down on spring pressure. He can go all the way back down to that 150, 350 mark.
Right. Well, okay. So here's how that spring pressure works in your benefit. Okay, if you got to a 150 spring versus a 325 spring, remember it's on the far side of the fulcrum of the rocker arm. So it's taken 325 pounds to open that spring, right? But it's on the far side of the rocker, so you have to multiply that times 1.6 or 1.7 or whatever your ratio of your rocker is, and that's the kind of power or like energy it's taking, say like 500 pounds from the lobe of the cam, right?
Yep.
Imagine the friction from that. So there's a lot to be gained there. Now I know that those heads probably got some big honking springs in them, and when you got big honking valves in them, and when you got big honking valve, you generally need big honking spring just to control that big valve.
Yeah, and we did that though. I did the math on that last time, and his valve is 190 on the intake, 176 on
Well, that's
the
not that
exhaust.
big.
No, and I remember he weighed them for me because I didn't have any cylinder head flow numbers, so that way I knew how much to set up the spring pressures for, and I want to say that it was pretty. It was like 129. Oh man, I'm going by 5 years of memory, but it was 129 grams. I think was the intake. I think.
Well, that's as big as the Cleveland heads that I got on my Ford, and
Yeah.
so that's not very big valve size for that huge cubic inch motor.
And that was the thing, is that that's what I was telling him before, is that he's hitting max velocity on that head, and there's just
Real
no
low
more,
RPM. Yeah.
there's no more room. And like we were saying before, and I think Dallas mentioned this, but everyone who's in the engine building knows this. If you take your cylinder head flow numbers, you can usually double it. So if you're making, say, 250 CFM, or 350 CFM, just double that. That's 700 horse. You're going to be right at about that number, depending on how efficient it is, RPM, yada yada yada. There's different things, but that's the capability of what that cylinder head can flow.
That's
You're
the
right
number,
there.
right? That's the number you need to realistically look at. Is like that guaranteed it will make that number. You might
Yeah.
get about 10, 15 more either side, right? But that's generally, if you just double that number, that's where you come up with however many horsepower it's going to make.
Yeah, and you're right there. And there was someone also in the chats that made about the same number with the same heads. So there you go. That's exactly what it is. So he's saying, so you say I need a tunnel ram? No, I'm not, because what's
No,
going to
you
happen
need
is
more cylinder head.
you need more cylinder head.
If you want to do them RPM, you need more cylinder head.
leave your combination absolutely the way it is right now. If that's all you want is just more RPM, then put a better cylinder head on it. If you want to drive it more on the street and whatnot, put the hydraulic profile back in it. Leave, and like Dallas was saying, you could put the solid lifters in it and just tighten up the lash to, like, say 6 or 8, so you can start there. Or you can go all the way back to the hydraulic, put it 20 off the bottom like we were talking about before, and then just go from there and lighten up the spring pressure.
Otherwise, decrease the cubic inch size and you'll be able to run them RPM. It's just going to make the same horsepower number, but it's going to be at higher RPM. I did low RPM stuff. My whole idea behind low RPM is this: when you start exceeding 6,000 RPM, the longevity of your engine starts falling off by like a whole bunch, right? I mean, like bearing wear just is nuts and all kinds of stuff.
That's exactly what I told him on the phone. I said, big block, imagine 6,000 is your number. You can drive that all day long, hit 6,000. 6,500 is when you start having issues. Small block, 6,500, no problem. 7,000 is when you start having issues. There's like that magic numbers there. You're right at those magic numbers. And here's the setup. He wants to know, is Roadrunner 3,400 pounds, 6-speed stick shift, narrow Dana 60 to 456 gear. You don't really even need that much. Well, you got a 14.
He's got a 6-speed. He's also got a 6-speed.
Yeah, just leave it alone, man. Go out there and drive it. Just power shift that thing right at 5,800, and you'll never have to worry about it. That's the whole beauty of it. Once you get up into those RPMs, you're going to have problems with oil pressure. And that was another thing I was looking at too. Is the last dyno here? Get back here. Is you started out at 98 pounds, and you only went, and it never dropped below 96 pounds of oil pressure, even at that higher RPM. But the second that you started getting up into the 6,800, that thing started dropping off, and that's windage. That's the air getting inside the, whipping up the oil.
Aerating in the oil.
Yeah, it's just aerating it. Yeah. And then I looked at the other one that you sent me with the hydraulic roller. Now that one's going to consume a lot more oil as far as where it's going to be spraying out. Yeah, let me pull that one back up here again real quick. And on that one, your oil pressure was 78 and went down to 75. And that's also too, that would be, you could drop some of that oil pressure down a little bit. You don't need 98 pounds of oil pressure.
No, that's where
yeah, I know.
Shane and I, we have talked about this at length.
Yeah.
It's volume over pressure, right?
Yes.
That's what you want. And if you could anyway increase the volume and decrease that pressure, you'll probably gain 25 horsepower at the crank.
Yeah, that's a big speed secret that a lot of the guys do. Just run a good oil. So, and then as far as this last one too is what it was looking at as far as your air consumption at peak horsepower when you had I'm going to go, like I said, once again, full John Wilburn here. The air consumption was only 795 CFM. So this thing really at 6100 only needs 771 CFM. So you could put an 850 on this thing and get rid of that Dominator. You would pick up velocity, so the torque would come way back up.
Your torque would go up and occur earlier.
Yeah, exactly. So it would occur earlier, but it would still make the same horsepower on the other end because you're not really RPMing it to get that big of an RPM. So
that tells you right there the cylinder head is too small for that combo. Right
exactly
there.
Right there. It's exactly what I was getting at. That's the reason why they put all this stuff in here. So, they started the pull right at about 129 degrees. I like to usually start those at about 160. But yeah, that's what you got, man. I would be happy with it. If you're not happy with it, like I said, we talked about this already. I just get some better cylinder heads. That's it. Or just be happy with what you got. Take it to the track and run the thing. And here's what Bigfoot is saying. We ran a Quickfield 850, and that made
723 horse.
723
he was the
horse.
one saying that he had a similar combination that was 512 cubic inches with that same head. That's right. That's telling you that those heads are the bottleneck in that combination.
Yes.
But there's nothing wrong with that because that thing's making gobs of torque and it's making killer horsepower and it's actually drivable on the street. That's what you need to look at. That's a damn good street driving combo.
Yeah, that if you took that out, which we don't ever tell people to do, but if you ever took that out street racing,
no, to Mexico.
Go to Mexico. That's right.
Yeah.
Go to Mexico and do some racing. You would clean house. You would definitely.
I tell you what, I would put stock valve covers and everything back on it if I could.
Yeah, Bigfoots and Mopars. He's saying that a flat tapper cam 650 650. Yeah, that's what this combination. That's all it needs, and that's kind of what I did with the hydraulic roller. Was right at 650 650. I think is what it was 648 and 643. And the exhaust, I even softened up the exhaust on it, so it's got a little less on the exhaust, but a little bit more duration. But opening the valve, I was trying to cut down on deflection and all that stuff. So.
Hey, well, I think we beat this one to death.
Yes.
There's a couple questions I saw fly by here, and I got one kind of wrangled up. There's one from 38 POS Racing. As far as a generalization, building a burnout toy, what gears, trans, and RPM cam should be best? Starting with an S10 and a stock 5.3. Okay, so... All right, my opinion, if it's just a burnout toy and that's all it is, don't even change the cam. Don't even change the cam. Leave the stock cam in it. It's going to make tons of torque right off of idle. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that's what you want. Transmission, when you're looking at something that's a burnout toy, think about it. You're not talking drag racing. You're talking about burnout toy where it's not moving, okay? Yeah. And you want something that's just putting power to the ground so it can spin the tires.
And you want speed.
I would look at this one and it's like, this is where the 90s tried and true Turbo 350 comes into play because they can sit there. They don't get as hot as an automatic overdrive, right? Yep. They're considerably smaller, so you can package them in that S10 real simple, and I know they got a cross member for them. All you do is put an external cooler or the fan on it, and you can probably sit there and do a burnout all freaking day. And then if it pukes its guts out, guess what? It's $400 for a rebuild.
Yeah,
I would do a Turbo 350 up to that 5.3 in the S10, and what I would do is I'd probably find, if you're using that stock 5.3, it probably makes peak torque around 25. So I'd see if I could find a set of 308 gears.
I was going to say the same thing. Yeah, 308. Exactly what I was going to say. And that way you could just go, and even if you got a stick shift, you could put that thing in second, hammer it, and then put it into third, and then just let that thing eat. It would all that torque would just get those tires spinning, and it would just be an RPM to the moon.
I had a Buick Regal, 81 Regal, with a stock 350 Buick and a 2-barrel, and a Turbo 350 tranny and 255 gears. And I would do a burnout in this thing, and I mean it would do a burnout all day long as you wanted to, and wheel speed would be like just stratospheric, right? Mm-hmm. gears in them. 308 is a good gear. If you can get that 5.3 to make enough beans down low, and get the tire rolling. The reason why I say the Turbo 350, it's not going to eat up a bunch of torque. It's not going to eat up a bunch of horsepower. They're plentiful. They're real easy to rebuild. They're not expensive. And then if you're using a S10, I imagine you're probably using that stock spindly 7.5-inch rear end. And guess what? There's a million of those 7.5-inch rear ends in the junkyard with 308 gears in them.
Yeah.
So
right, the Racer Brown. I totally remember that Racer Brown. Twisted Mopar Garage. Compression is the magic piece of bearing beating. More compression, more penetrative maintenance needs. Preventative. Sorry about that. My screen here sometimes shakes from me hitting the thing, so sorry about that. My 512 had same cam I'm running now. I do have a 650 cam I'm going to put in it. Okay, well, bitchin'. There was actually another one up here too that was a 360 one. I'm actually trying to find it real quick.
Oh, I blew past one.
Yeah, right here. Jonathan Couchy. Yeah, head flow helps. No idea what the head flow of our 360 build modified to stock dual plane mid-rise to match. We have fully revved it out, but we're surprised it didn't fall off. Yes, that's because you have some decent head flow. Absolutely. And that's why a lot of these guys that are running like Circle Track, these guys are spinning these things to, like, say, a 360 cubic inch engine, and they're spinning these things to 7,200, 7,400 down the backstretch. And most of those cams are going to be in the 259, 257, duration of 50 on the intake, 265, 267 on the exhaust, somewhere in the 108 to 112, sometimes on the 106, depends on how they want to come off the corner. And because they have really good head flow, so they can get away with the small cam like that, and they're just basically running out the back door and it just doesn't fall off. So they have the small cam to get them off the corner, but then they can just keep that thing pinned. All right, Jonathan Couchy. I mean, I guess some guys would call this the wrong setup, but we're running a Hughes Whiplash cam with a 1.6 on a 86 D150 Dodge 360, 530 lift, intake, 50 exhaust. Some people might call that big. No, lift is really, I really...
That's relative.
Yeah, that's relative. Yeah, exactly. And here's the thing is that I only look at lift, and everyone else says, oh, you'll look at lift for... No, I look at lift at the 300 numbers, not really necessarily max lift. Because when you're getting up into RPM range and as far as running, you can see as much as 30 to 40, thousandths lift difference at max RPM just from deflection, and your camshaft physically gets smaller. And since I've been at COM, I've been seeing a lot of that on the Spintron. How much smaller the cam actually gets. It's quite amazing.
I always look at duration. I'm not so much big on the lift because, okay, if this is a stock head, guess what? It has never even been measured up to 500 lift. Never. Right? Like, no one ever intended to run that engine with that kind of lift on it. Yeah. So you don't have any flow numbers up there. But generally what you find is 200 to 400 is where all of your major manufacturers' factory cylinder heads were always tested. And what you'll find out is that once you get over to 400, no one even cares what it is because it was never tested up there, and it probably falls off. It probably starts falling off.
Yeah.
Or just stays the same. So
we've got a first person talking now. Colleen, see you later. You guys have a good night. Thank you for showing up. I appreciate it. So, but yes, and what I always look at is really is the intake closing events. That's the most important thing for me that I'm looking at whenever I'm doing a cam. And these Whiplash cams are designed for like factories type of compression. So
they're meant to work with that cylinder head with that factory piston, the whole 9 yards, right?
Yeah, exactly. 8.5 to 1 compression. And these sound really bitching for what they are, Oh, here he is. 223, 236. Yeah, I mean, 223, that's a decent cam. And that's like I think your factory 6-pack cam was close to those on like a 112. You tighten this thing up to like a 106, I think is what these Whiplashes are. It's going to help build a lot of cylinder pressure. And that's why they sound like they do when they're, when they're idling. Boogity, 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 Okay. He is Bigfoot's. Nothing wrong with those RPMs. I've ran them straight out of the box. They flow 291 at 600.
Well, that's actually a good number.
Yeah.
That's the Perform RPM that you reckon for the small block that you're recommending?
Yeah, I'm telling you.
Because that's if you look at that, you can almost make 600 horsepower with that motor.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, the RPMs are great. They're like the staple. Here's my combination. I've had a few recipes over the years, and one of them is with these Performer RPMs right out of the box with the Performer RPM intake, and it was with a Magnum engine with these Magnum RPM heads. I believe it was 236, 240 on a 108 LSA, and it made 467 horse on basically 9.5 to 1 on a pump gas that you can get in that car and drive it anywhere you want to go. Nothing crazy as far as the camshaft. 2,500 stall, and it would run all day long there, and it 500 horse really, really, really easily that anybody could tune. And that was with the 650 Holly on it. So, twisted duration doesn't change on bigger rockers, just increase in lift, very, very little in duration. Yes, he is correct. Very little duration as far as off-seat, duration at 50. Where you're going to see it is more at the 2, 3, and 400 at valve, because that's how it's not just at the peak, it's actually a curve. So you make the peak taller, and then you're making the curve wider. So you're just increasing more air into the curve pretty much everywhere. But here's the thing: is that if you don't have the head flow to support it, you're not really going to gain much by the bigger rocker arms. You want to look at those numbers to see how much CFM you have in there, and that will give you a percentage gain.
Well, on my small block Ford, I went from 1.6 to 1.7 ratio rockers, and you would swear when you drove it around, like, God, this thing is so much quicker. It revs so much faster. And you go to the track, and the mile an hour would be exactly the same, right? But it would be, it was just, I guess what you're looking at is it'd be the torque and horsepower values at part throttle, mid throttle, that whole nine. It feels quicker, it feels snappier. There's no doubt about it. The butt dyno doesn't lie, because if it feels different and you're used to driving the vehicle, it's making a difference.
Yes.
But when you're looking at a drag strip under just wide open full throttle runs, it might not make any more horsepower, because those numbers in between doesn't really matter. You have it wide open the whole time.
So Bigfoot's saying that his made 619 horse and 609 torque with a 9-to-1 compression
With
engine.
11-to-1 compression.
Sorry,
Man, what's up with your dyslexia today?
It keeps. I keep hitting this thing, and you see how it shakes. So
Yeah.
I don't know. And plus, the screen's really small. So yeah, So far, calculations, I'm getting 500-ish to the wheels. That's sounds about right. Yeah, sounds about right.
The first time I ever have you ever dynoed something like at the wheels? Mm-hmm. Did my T-Bird. The motor, I had the engine dynoed on an engine dyno. It was made 653 horse and 650 foot-pounds of torque, and all of it occurred pretty low. It was like, I want to say peak horsepower was like 6,400, and then peak torque was like 5,700. Okay, so it was like it was all fairly low. I wanted to keep the RPM down so it would last 18 years was the idea. And when I took it had it dynoed, I had it done out there at West Tech when we were trying to get it dialed in for Fontana, right? And West Tech is right there by Fontana Drag Strip in what used to be Fontana Drag Strip in Los Angeles. And it was making like 473 at the wheels, and I'm like, golly, where the hell is it losing all this power? And the guy's like, don't worry about it, dude. Don't worry about that number. It's all in the converter, and you'll see it. And they wound it up, and then all of a sudden you see the tire just start to freaking grow. The motor just got to a steady tone and stayed there, but the tire started to grow, and that's when the numbers actually started to turn out on the dyno, on the rear wheel dyno.
Yeah, it's crazy how that works too.
Yeah, I'd never seen it actually function like that before. That's how it's always been said that it works, but you actually can see it.
Did you do it with a slick on it? It was slick. So after it came off on the wheel, and did you see how it would do the form? It would actually have these waves behind it.
Yeah, it would actually. Well, it almost turns into like a D shape.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was weird looking. Oh, David James is saying that the accelerator pump adjustment seems better. So
Huh.
I'm assuming that this is not was. I'm assuming you meant to say with. Accelerator pump adjustment seems better. So yeah, yeah. We just got done working. What did I miss? You missed the live tech talk on Bryce Kaufman's engine. It's actually a pretty in-depth one, so go back and check it out from 8.
And it's a really good street engine, and I would stop trying to RPM it and just be happy with it being a street engine.
I'm telling you, right? I'm going to text him that after we're done here. I was like, dude, just leave it alone. And, you know, he was asking if it would be good in the chart, in the Roadrunner. I said, dude, man.
3,400 pounds. Yeah,
just get
put
out
it
there
in a
and drive
Grand
it.
Fury if you want. It's still going to be a freaking monster.
It's 700 foot-pounds of torque. It's going to break more things than you can imagine. I mean, you're going to need that Dana 60 back there for real. Let's see, moving on. With me, oh yeah, it says, with me driving runs 12s all day long. Yeah. You know, I think what my dyslexia is today, too, is I was in the sun outside pretty much all day sweating, and I'm a little tired. I think I need more salt. I don't know.
Jonathan Couch is saying, is 20 CFM a flow on a V6 worth 15 horsepower? No. If you take that, like you're talking about cylinder head flow, if you double that CFM number, that's how much horsepower it should make.
Could make, yes. It
Yeah,
should.
the
It should
potential
and
of
could.
it.
Potential of it. And also, too, it's not just at peak numbers. You really, like we were saying before, I don't really look at those so much. I always look at like the 300-400 numbers because it sees that quite a bit. And I look at the 300 numbers because a lot of times our camshafts will have 200 on the cam. You multiply that through, that comes right at about 300-ish with the rock arm ratio. So that way you can calculate how much time is it's there at that flow at 300. Then you can calculate 400 and 500 so on.
So, Bryce is saying, with everything that's been said, would I have any difficulty leaving normally at a street light? Well, you said it's a 6-speed in that thing.
It'd be just
So,
fine, dude.
first gear is probably, what, 327?
308, I think. No, it depends on his 6-speed, but I think it's a
It's
308.
They're usually pretty low first gear. I don't know. So, let's just throw this out there, okay?
Well,
It's
before
making
you go
peak
to-
torque at 4,700.
Just ask him, Bryce, what kind of transmission is it? That way we know exactly what the gear ratio is in first gear. But go ahead.
Well,
Sorry.
what you normally find is that the lower the first gear ratio, the easier it is to dig out of the hole, and it doesn't generally want to spin. So, I don't know. I'm thinking that you'd probably be fine, and I'd just idle that sucker out of the hole almost.
Yeah.
Bring it up to like 1,500 and just freaking, it's going to have no problem because it's probably making over 400 foot-pounds of torque at 1,500.
Oh, it's a T56. So T56 first gear.
There's probably a myriad of them.
Yes, there is. It's showing 266.
266 first gear? That's actually about like what my T10 is. You're actually going to be fine, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bring it up to 1,500, slip the clutch a bit, and then that sucker will just take off no problem. It probably won't even be hairy. Now, if you were to mat that sucker and dump it at 4,700, you'd probably have a hard time taking off because it sounded like it was making over 700 foot-pounds of torque at 4,700. So
It's actually 266 first, 178 second, 130 third, 1 to 1 fourth, 080 for fifth, and then 063 for overdrive. So yeah, that sounds like an awesome setup, man. With that gear ratio you got and that tire size, it'd be just.
I'll tell you what, it is actually going to be really happy on the interstate.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you think about it, it's probably going to be going around about 2,200 RPM or 2,000 RPM with a 456 gear and that heavy-duty deep overdrive, the 0.63, right? Times, well, and even if it's 2,200, 2,300, that thing is going to be so sprightly on the interstate. It's a 3,400-pound car.
Yeah. Oh, you're gonna get on it. It's gonna hammer down.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know what I'm going to do yet.
No, we're gonna see this and we're gonna twist your arm.
I don't know, dude. It's not. I know it's in the garage. It's just not. I don't know if it's in the cards at all. To tell you the truth, I do need to take it somewhere, and I do need to get some test hits on it, and I would like to get some pictures and video of it so I can take the limiters off and then put the thing up for sale. Right? It's just sat in my garage for 5 years. my life sucks right now, and I'd rather just not have it looking at me, and then I'll get this 63 special done.
I say we keep putting pressure on them. Every Wednesday, we're going to keep bringing this up. Dallas, did you say something about making a run with your bird at No Name
I just won't be here
Nationals?
next week. How's that?
Well, then we'll
F
just
that.
save it for the
I
next
know what I'm
week
in
after.
for. I'm just not going to be here.
Oh, I like that's funny. Oh, Winnie English just popped in. Awesome. She's got home from work. Man, it's already 8:45. Man,
Yeah,
these
it's gone by pretty quick tonight.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, I was in my my group meeting before this, so I've been sitting here for literally like an hour and 20 minutes longer than the 2 hours that we'll do tonight. So it's going to be 3 hours and 20 minutes I've been sitting here. So I'm definitely ready to stand up and move around.
That's why you're shifting. I gotcha. Now, he did ask one question about this right here. How about vacuum for power disc brakes? Honestly, let me look. Does it have an inch on here as far as your...
Does the car have power steering? If the car has power steering, I would forget all about... There's a simple trick that nobody even knows, okay?
Exactly right.
The Grand National came with what was called Hydro Boost, right?
Yes.
And it comes on big 3/4 ton, full-size trucks, all that jazz. Well, it also comes on a Chevrolet Astrovan. It's the same one that they used on the Grand National. And all you need is a power steering pump and a high-pressure line to run that Hydro Boost, and no matter what your camshaft is, as long as the engine's running, you're going to have brake pressure.
Yeah. He's saying no, it does not power. It's got a Gerst front end conversion, so he basically just has like a
Manual.
a rack. Yeah,
Manual rack.
Yeah. So I was looking at his. It doesn't show any idle on this. It only shows the vacuum at gauge vacuum at RPM. So I mean, it was pulling almost 2.45 inches of vacuum at peak horsepower. So it definitely was definitely needs at that point need a little bigger of a carburetor or a different setup. So it's got a little bit of...
Well, no, we already determined it's the cylinder head, right?
Yeah, cylinder head, yeah. So it's definitely pulling... Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, but Buff's saying what's wrong with manual brakes. There's nothing wrong with manual brakes. I like them because they have more feel, and I actually think it has less problems because there's less things that go wrong. Mm-hmm. That's my personal opinion on it.
I love manuals. In fact, that my 68 Dart, the road race one, is going to have manual brakes on it.
I like them. And unlike Shane, who's going to road race one, I actually like manual drums all the way around. I do. As long as you maintenance the drums correctly, it's a freaking fantastic braking system, and they're cheap as crap. People take them off and throw them away, and it's like, oh, I want to have discs. Why? You want something that drags all the time? In a drag racing application, if drums is the ideal thing.
Yeah.
They're generally lighter. They have more braking surface area. That's why they get hot, right?
Mm-hmm.
They stop better.
And he takes way less master cylinder, so everything's lighter. Yeah. You know, Plan Z, I think, has got the 9-inch drums on it, doesn't it? I think it's got 9-inch drums.
I don't know.
I think it's got drum brakes. You know, I have one of those. I have a 75 disc brake setup out there out of a Dart. If I take Plan Z on drag week, I'll put disc brakes on it just for drag week. You know.
So Max Wedge Dick Dashley is saying, Dallas Go Racing. I race 4 days a week when my ex split. Smiled 4 days a week. You know, I like the idea. All right. Here's the problem. Like right now, everything's kind of up in the air, and there's no extra cash for anything, and it looks like I might be having 2 children live with me, and I don't know if I want to spend that extra cash, to be honest. Or I can look at it like this: so you only live once. F it.
Exactly.
Right?
That's exactly what I was going to say. You only live once. You know?
I mean, I need to get that thing out, and I need to let it eat, and I need to really get it dialed in and tuned in, because I've never got it to run good here in the Midwest at all. I had it pretty good out in California, in Southern California. I'd done a 620s, and then when I ran it up at Fontana, I ran 950, 957 is what it ran up there.
Fontana's like the track too, man. That was
dude. It's downhill. It is freaking.
You're going with the wind.
Yes, it's nice setup. So you got the.
The only thing that scared me about Fontana is that you're going towards like a bridge, so like there's a big embankment, you know.
Yeah.
Even though it's way far away, it's a little intimidating. You're like, ooh, it's you know,
Yeah.
You got plenty of time, you know. Yeah. He's saying, I still say you get out there and drive it. I say, you know, at least if you do it one time a month, at least you'll be able to smile one time a month. How about that?
Yeah, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. I don't really know. I've actually thought about pulling the cleaver out and calling Drag Boss Garage and see if they need another cleaver motor with the EFI set up on it, and they can come pick it up, and I'll put a Buick in that freaking T-Bird.
There you go.
I thought about putting that turbocharged 350 Buick in it.
Why don't you run that super stock engine in there just to see what it would do?
Because I got to make everything to make it work, but I just thought about like keep the car, and you know what I really thought about doing, Shane? It's got an 8.8-inch rear end. I thought about putting 255 gears in it.
Yeah.
Okay. And
run the mile?
No, I thought about putting 255s in it and a Buick 350 because remember the body is designed to go over 200 miles an hour from the factory.
Yeah.
Okay. So I put a Buick 350 in it, 255 gears, and a T55 speed, and then I go out and see if I can do 200 in Bonneville, and I spray it till the rods fall out.
Right.
Or
Yeah,
you
why
go
not?
200.
Yeah, or you go 200, or even put it in one of those mile races where they do the standing mile.
Yeah.
You
I just
spray
thought
the
about
shit
going
out.
to Bonneville with it. I mean,
Yeah, at least then you could see you're on Bonneville, right?
it weighs 2,600 pounds, man. I mean, it doesn't take. I guess weight there doesn't really make much of a difference.
No, I think they actually want more weight. A lot of those guys put heavy weights in.
Probably so they don't get blown all over the place at that
Yeah.
speed.
Yeah. Patrick saying my brother's 70 Roadrunner weighs 4,100 pounds with a 520 big block, runs 120 plus miles an hour, passes stops, all original drums with no problems. He's at 1,000 street miles and over 100 passes. Yeah, I had drum brakes on my car for a very long time, and I liked them. They worked well.
I'll give you an idea of how awesome drum brakes work. Drum brakes were on top fuel dragsters only on the rear up until the 1970s.
Yeah.
Right? So they were just going over 200 miles an hour with a stock factory production drum brake.
Yeah, and he's saying it right here, perfect. Try not smiling on the return road. It'll be impossible.
I
You'll be
know the
smiling.
thing runs good. It does run good. I mean, well, I think I told you, Shane. I don't remember, what is your Cookie Monster 60 foot at?
1.3. I never
Okay.
got into the 1.2s.
My T-Bird will do 125 60 foots with a 390 gear.
Wow.
Right? And I mean, it leaves stupid. Like, if I didn't have limiters on it, the first time I took it to San Diego to, what's that drag strip up in the mountains?
Verona.
Yeah, Verona. I took it to Verona. They used to have a photographer out there, and his name was his older guy.
Pete.
Man, that's right. It is Pete, and I'm trying to remember what his last name is. But anyway, Pete used to shoot the cars from like the slower cars from behind the Christmas tree. So he'd go up there in like street class or just whatever else they had, a pro, whatever. He would shoot the cars from up there behind the Christmas tree, and you could get a really good angle on them, right? Mm-hmm. So I pulled up there, say, "Hey, what's it going to run? I don't know. I need to make licensing passes." "Oh, well, it looks like a street car, so we're going to put you in street," right? "Oh, okay. Well, I got to make licensing passes for 640 and faster, but I'll go with you on the street class stuff." Yeah. And they put me in street class, and Pete Liebig, that's his name. Yeah. He stood up there behind that Christmas tree, and I let off that sucker, and I mean, it came up and went to the right. And he got a picture of, I got the wheel cranked to the left, and the tires are off the ground, so it was absolutely useless, and the car's coming right at him. Yeah. And he stopped what he was doing right then, walked back to the pits. I pulled in there, and I said, "Hey, did you get a good shot?" He said, "I'm never shooting that car again from that angle. That thing scared me so bad, I almost pissed my pants." Right?
So check it out. Here, another John Wilburn.
Yes,
like
that's the pictures, just like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's me and that was Greg Curtis. We matched raced probably 5 times
Oh, I matched race. Unfortunately, see, Greg is good, and that car ran really good. Now he sold it and it's gone, but he was a heavy hitter in the match race madness,
Yeah.
and I only got to run him one time, and it was what 2 weeks after my dad died.
Yeah.
I was a wreck. I mean, I showed up that day and I left the battery on in the car all night and it wouldn't start, and then so I had to get a jump just to get it running. And it's got 2 batteries, and I put it on a charger all day, and I fought low power all day. And if you're running an EFI car, all right, electricity is where it's at. Okay, your MSD box won't fire below like 13 volts. You know, I want to say it actually gets down to like 11.2, and then it won't fire. But you got MSD box, 2 fuel pumps. I had electric water pump. You got it's just a lot of juice this thing takes. It had 2 Optima yellow tops in it.
Wow.
And I couldn't get it to run worth of crap, falling on its face, the whole 9 yards. So, and no, I didn't have an E4 in it.
Did he win or did you win?
Oh, he beat the pants off me. Like 2 hits, and it was over with. I couldn't even get the car to run.
Yeah, me and Greg. He never beat me, but it was. I'm telling you, we were looking at each other. Now, mine's a small block. It was 408. His was like a 555.
I know, it was a huge cubic inch big block Chevy.
And my car is definitely not quiet, and I would definitely be out on him, and I would hear him coming. Like it would just shake the car, and you're just like looking over, and we're looking at each other as we're going through the trap. So we're literally looking at each other. That's how close the race was.
So it's hard to explain if you've never ran a really fast car in a heads-up race before, because the unique thing about it is when you leave, the other guy's leaving relatively close to you, okay? And you will be like sawing at the wheel, hanging on, trying to drive the damn car, and you look over and this other guy hasn't even moved. And it doesn't feel like you're going fast because the other guy is not moving at all.
Yeah, he's
and then
right there.
And what happens is about the 330 foot mark is where the cars start to make their pull. That's where they either come into the horsepower or the other one just doesn't have enough, you know. And that's where, and they'll just start to slowly inch ahead of you, you know. And you got your foot buried through the floor pan, and just pushing as hard as you can, trying to find everything you can, you know. Heads up, racing in a fast car is fun.
And it is. And what makes it so much fun too is that even when you're shifting, because sometimes your gear ratios are different, you'll see the cars. You'll kind of be doing this and doing this and doing this, and man, and especially the big block, because that thing really puts the power down at the end. And man,
it comes on you hard.
I'm going to put we have Tad Locke's Tool Shed. If everyone would go over there
and sub.
And sub. He is currently, I'm putting that up right now. He is currently at 495. So get over there, get him up to 500, so that way he can get into the No Name Nationals and he can be part of the crew. And looking at his videos, he's got a lot of tools and a lot of shorts, videos. Yeah, so go check him out, get him up there, because we always like to have new people up there. So, man, we're about 2 minutes away. Anything you wanna plug?
No, I don't really want to plug anything. Don't buy any HRA stuff. I'll have to mail it out to you, and I don't feel like doing it. It's not that I'm lazy, guys. I have no heart right now. I don't have any heart.
Yeah, the only thing I'm going to plug is that this Friday, Mr. Wilburn on his channel, he's going to be having a few of the people that are going to be in the No Name Nationals. Myself, there'll be a few other people, and we're going to be talking about the money that that's going to be up for Mr. Joe, and as far as
for
bounties,
grabs, payouts, all that stuff.
Come get the
Dude,
Professor P money.
How would that work out if I ran the T-Bird at the No Name Nationals in the bracket class and just cleaned everybody's clock?
Why not?
You can't race in your own stuff, but it's my last race. F this. I'm going out with a bang, right?
There you go. Now you're talking. Everybody get behind it. You know what I mean? Just get in there. Now, I'm putting up the Professor P money is going to be, but you'll learn more about it. Come over and see John Wilburn on Friday. I believe it's 8 o'clock, I think is what it is. and that's what we're going to be talking about as far as just on the money side of it. And I think John Cope's got some money up, and I think Patrick, he's got a bounty on me now, so there's $100.
Patrick does?
Yeah.
Aren't you running the Lizard King, the green slant car?
I'm bringing the Cookie Monster, man.
For the bracket?
No, I'm going the 28, 10, 50 class.
Oh, yeah, I know that one, yeah.
Yeah, so you put a bounty on me to take me out. So, okay, let's go look at his. Let's go look at him. Refresh Tad's tool locks, because we're not going to get off here until he has 500, and he's at 502. So congratulations, there you go. Tad Locks Tool Shed. You are now in the No Name National.
It's officially time for us to bail out.
Yes, it is.
So I can get out of this chair, man. I feel like. Oh.
All right, everybody, keep emailing Dallas. Get him to get him to raise.
Don't email me. I don't need an email.
Yeah. All right. You guys take it easy. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back here next week. All right. You guys take it easy. And once again, slantdailygarage@yahoo.com. Once again, slantdailygarage@yahoo.com. Send questions over there, or if some videos you want us to critique, or you can even send them to HRA, and we'll check it out from there.
You know what? I think that's what we need to do is get some videos to critique, and then Shane and I are going to do a Mystery Science Theater 3000 review of them.
You know, you came up with that idea so many years ago. Remember we were talking about that?
I know. Just like the treadmill thing, too, though. So, and
All right,
I junked that thing. All right.
Oh, you did?
I'll see you. I'll see you guys later.
All right, you guys have a good night. Thanks for coming by, and you guys take it easy. All righty. And 3.